Hello, welcome to Chess Match, Learn to Play Chess with the Rochester Chess Center. I am guest instructor Ryan Horst, and I have Dale Janizek and Rita Shortino along with me to play a nice little blitz chess game with us today. So you can start his clock and we'll begin the chess game. And this so far, I know it's early, but good opening ideas, which is getting your pawns out, getting your small minor pieces out. And by getting his bishop and knight out early, he has the ability to castle, and that takes the pressure away from his king and allows him to develop the rest of the pieces and maybe give him an advantage to attack her king later on. Or I should say quicker, not later on, but quicker. I noticed he thought differently about moving his knight, which was a good idea to get his other knight out, just like Rita would. She's getting her knight out. She'd ideally like to get her knight in the middle of the board, but she placed a pawn there, which is one of the reasons why you don't really want to move this pawn one forward unless you have a reason to. Then she made a mistake. It happens, and kind of like I mentioned before, don't let one mistake ruin the rest of the game. Everybody will make a mistake, especially new players. So it's important to just take your time and play smart moves. Now this is a good example if you just look at the game, if you look for white. White has three pieces surrounding black's king. And this is a good example of if you get your pieces out early, you can use multiples of them. He can still get his bishop and queen involved. But there's lots of stuff you can do when your piece is out. Really good things happen when you have your pieces out doing things as opposed to leaving them behind. So this is a good example showing how white got its pieces out. That's another good move to get another piece out. And now you have just more pieces involved that can get involved in, attacking a king, which in her case is quite vulnerable, kind of sitting there. But I think she did a really good job of hiding it and protecting it, moving the pawns, allowing her king some room. Sometimes saving it is hard. And one strategy that I noticed him doing that Dale was using with the white pieces is he's in a position to just trade down. He's won a couple of pieces. The best thing you can do from here is just trade pieces, because at the end of the game, if you know your basic checkmates with a king and a queen or a king and the rooks, it should be a basic checkmate from there. Not a bad idea. And one of the things you'll see too is castling will also not just protect your king, but allow your rook to become active. Because one of the bad things about trading is you notice her king is not really in danger right now, but it can be in danger once the pieces start to come out. And again, he's offering a trade of pieces because he knows he is up. And by her trading pieces, it makes the game simpler and simpler and less chances for mistakes. And like I said, every beginner will make a mistake, and multiple mistakes, and that's okay. That's part of being new at chess and learning the game. But if you want to make things simpler, try to trade as even as possible, because the end game, very complicated, but can also be simpler to to not lose so many pieces. There's a lot more complication to go in the endgame, but trading pieces is something that is very wise to do when you're up. Now this is a good example of Rita being, she's in a really tough position. It's going to be really difficult to do much of anything except hang on and hope. But it's also a good idea for practice for Dale's side to learn how to, for white, how do you win a position like this and how do you, set this up. And he's setting up into a pretty basic, and I don't know if he will, use this or not, but there's a pretty basic 2-rook or rook and queen checkmate that every beginner player should know how to do. And we'll see how he does with these.
Checkmate.
And that is checkmate. Shake hands. Very nice game, both of you. And now for the tip of the day. We've talked about back row checkmates. One of the other checkmates that everybody would like to learn from a younger level, very simple to do, and you can do it with a rook and a queen, or you can do it with 2 rooks. So right now we'll just do it with a rook and a queen. And the idea is your first move is to trap the king in the back. And then at this point, really, if we just kind of ignore this for a while, there's not much for her to do. But we can go here, and it's called a ladder checkmate. And you can get the king and the rook, or the queen and the rook, excuse me, or you can do it with 2 rooks. But this checkmate, it's almost kind of very similar to a back row checkmate, except this time you're putting the wall here. But this is a very good checkmate to learn how to do. It's a very good checkmate to practice. And a very simple way to practice is to remove the pieces from the board. You can leave your king on the board, but practice with these 2 rooks and see if you can get into a position where you deliver checkmate this way.
Chess Match is sponsored by the Rochester Chess Center, which has been serving the Rochester chess community for over 24 years.
Dave Petty versus Connor Wagner, CCCR match 10-2-2013.
And my plan here is that after he saves his knight, I push my pawn forward to e3. And even though that pawn can just be taken for free, it's okay because the f pawn that would be capturing it is also defending the pawn on g3. So if he takes my pawn, it compromises his castle, and I'll come crashing in. Connor saves his knight, allowing me to capture the pawn on f2, which will also serve to destroy the pawn structure in front of his king. And that's the point of black's strategy by pushing all these pawns forward. So black's strategy is actually succeeding here, and I was convinced and sure that I had a winning position. And Connor thought so too. So pawn takes pawn. By trading off that pawn in front of his king, I'm weakening the whole structure. Now that g3 pawn that my knight is attacking on the edge of the board will also be a target, which is why he has to come out with his king here. Because if he takes the pawn with his rook, then g3 would be hanging, so king takes, defends the pawn on g3. Now I continue to blast open the area around his king. Do you see what I'm going to do? That's right, I'm going to play the move pawn to f4, which is going to trade off another set of pawns in front of his king. And if the king has no pawn shelter, he's usually just a sitting duck, a goner. So I was convinced that I was doing fantastically in this position. There I go. pawn to f4, and after these pawns trade, it's going to open the f-file. My rook's sitting there on the f-file staring at his king, and around here, Connor made a very good decision. Connor chooses to trade off not just the pawn, but after my knight recaptures, he trades off my knight for his undeveloped bishop on c1. Notice that even when I'm 100% sure what I'm going to do, I'm still taking a few seconds to double check, because I still at this point have 46 minutes left for the whole game. So I take the pawn, and Connor quickly trades off that powerful knight for his dark squared bishop. And this turned out to be a very good decision. Notice that one of the only times I play instantly is when there's a recapture. Pretty much always you want to recapture unless there's some sort of intermediate move you can play. Here there's nothing, you just have to take it back, so there's no point thinking about it. So Connor plays the move e3, attacking my rook and making me decide. Do I go sideways? Do I go backwards? If I go backwards, where do I go? It's called putting the question to the rook, and it's not always easy to decide exactly where you want to retreat to. I'm pretty sure I want to stay on the f-file where his king lives. Now, the other reason Connor played this move e3, I didn't realize it at the time, is because he's planning a king evacuation. He's going to run his king to the middle of the board. Now that I've destroyed the pawn shelter in front of his king on the king side, his king actually runs back to the center. Normally in chess you castle because the center gets opened up early and your king isn't safe there. But here, the center is the safest place for his king because that's where all of his pawns are still intact, and kings like to hide behind pawns. Now here, before the king evacuation, Connor did something which completely surprised me, but it turned out to be a very good move. In this position, he's traded off his dark squared bishop for my knight. This just happened. And that means he's going to be weak on the dark squares because his bishop can't help him control those dark squares. So in general, when you don't have a dark squared bishop, you absolutely do not do what Connor just did. He pushed his pawn from a dark square to a light square, meaning that all of the dark squares on the board are easier for me to control because his pawn was controlling dark squares. Now it's not. But the reason he played that move, it turned out to be very smart, is he's playing not against my bishop, but against my knight on e7. Suddenly, after the move, pawn to e4, my knight can't go anywhere. I can't do anything with my poor knight. And it's actually getting in the way of all my other pieces. So this move slowed me down, stopped me from bringing my knight to the f5 square. It was definitely coming there. And suddenly, I don't have a quick, straightforward plan. I have to start maneuvering again. And this is the moment where I went wrong in this game. I'd succeeded in the opening plan. I had opened up his king side. His king is weak. I have a dark squared bishop that is very powerful, but I was kind of obsessed with checkmating him because I'd been attacking his king so well this whole time. Really, a good plan would be to go after this pawn on h4 because it's isolated, it's alone, it's an easy target for me to pick off, and if I do, I'll have two passed pawns on the king side. But instead of going after that weakness, I was obsessed with his king, and I tried to continue opening lines, and things got very double-edged very quickly. And so here, Connor starts the evacuation of his king. King to e2. The move at this point didn't take me by surprise. I was sad to see it happen because it's absolutely correct. And I thought, oh man, good for you, Connor. He played the right idea. running your king into the middle is very rare, especially in the middle game with the queen still on the board, but here it's correct because that's where he has shelter. So my plan here became to destroy that shelter, to trade off more pawns, and by doing so to open up more lines toward his king, but probably this turned out to be the wrong plan. So here Connor has just been thinking for a long time, trying to decide what to do, and once again he chooses a smart move. He just continues evacuating his king, moving it over towards the queen side where he has pawns. And notice that things are locking up a little bit on the queen side. There he goes, king to d2. And here, I very much wanted to start opening things up on the queen side, but I got ahead of myself. The best way to open things up on the queen side is to trade pawns, and the pawn I want to trade is this b pawn on the b file. I play the move a6. It's a risky move because once these pawns trade, notice that Connor has a rook and a queen lined up on the b file already. So my pawn on b7 is going to be a sitting duck, but I was gambling that even if he won this extra pawn, it would just be another open line for me to attack his king. He can't run to the king side. I want to make it so that he can't run to the queen side and checkmate him, but it didn't work out the way I wanted it to. Okay, so Pawner takes. He goes for it. He thinks for several minutes, and at this point I already have a time advantage of 11 minutes on the clock. And as you get down to the wire, this becomes very important. Now, 28 minutes is still a long time, but once you make things complicated, those minutes can disappear very quickly. So now the question becomes, for me, how do I recapture the pawn? If I want to try to attack his king right now, I'll take back with the rook, and that's what I did, but notice that it leaves my pawn on b7 hanging, and Connor snatches that pawn. There he goes, he takes it, and now white is up a pawn. This is called a material imbalance because he's got more than me. But notice that there's lots of open lines on the side of the board. Now his king really is stuck in the center. He can't go left, he can't go right. And so I was feeling pretty excited here, but I jumped the gun. This a6 move was too soon, and it turned out that I didn't have a great follow-up here. My plan was to take his knight on c3 with my bishop, giving up my good bishop, but then to recapture that extra pawn on a2 and go after his king. It turns out that was the best plan, but I chickened out at the last minute. I was nervous about giving up my bishop, my dark squared bishop, which I thought was my trump, and so instead I ended up playing the move queen to a5. And I burned my entire time advantage on this move. Thought of it. So you'll notice here that I've been thinking for 13 minutes. My 11-minute time advantage is gone. Now I'm the one who has less time, and I end up choosing not even the right move. Connor has had plenty of time to think, and he instantly blitzes out e5, a brilliant move that I didn't see after all that time thinking. e5 blocks my bishop from attacking his knight, and now things are tricky for me. He's threatening my knight on e7 with his queen, and he also has a very devious plan to do a perpetual on my queen. A perpetual is when you attack something over and over and over, and it has to keep running away, and you never have time to do anything else but run away, and the game ends in a draw. Normally, you do a perpetual check. You attack the king, check, he runs away, check, he runs away, check, he runs away, and the king, and you never have time to do anything but run with your king, and so the game turns into a draw. But you can also do a perpetual on other things like the valuable queen. And right here, the tables have really turned. I tried to do something too aggressive when it was no longer correct, and quickly my advantage evaporated, and I was struggling for equality. It was actually, I was worse for a long time. In the end, I managed to make a draw. But this is an example of something that happens in chess and also in life, and that is you get stuck in a paradigm. You get stuck in an idea of what you want to happen. In this case, I was trying to attack his king, and I did that in the beginning and in the middle, and it was working for me. But at some point, I needed to shift and do something else. I needed to stop attacking his king because it was no longer correct. There were other things to do, but I was obsessed with it. I was focused on it, and that's why I almost lost this game from a fantastic position, because I kept trying to do something that was no longer correct. And this is something you have to keep in mind, not just in chess, but in life, and that is that as circumstances change, sometimes your goals need to change too. You can't just make a goal and then stick with it no matter what. It's good to reevaluate every once in a while, and by failing to do that in this game, I almost lost to my handsome student Connor. So it was a good lesson for me, and hopefully it's a good lesson for you. So here I burn even more time. Now Connor has a 12-minute advantage. In just 2 moves, I've gone from having an 11 or 12-minute advantage myself to being down by 11 to 12 minutes, and my position isn't even good. This means that the plan I chose was wrong. I've burned a lot of time trying to figure out how not to lose, and this is what can happen. Even when you have an advantage, if you choose the wrong plan, you can just suddenly go from winning to losing. This is something that is frustrating for a lot of people when they play chess. They can play a great game for a long time and then play 1 bad move or 2 bad moves and ruin everything. But such is life. Hi, and welcome to Chess Match, Learn Chess with the Rochester Chess Center. I'm guest instructor David Petty, and with me today are 2 brothers ready to do battle. On the right, we've got Aiden. On the left, Leo. And this is their second game, 5 minutes on the clock. Let's shake hands, and you may begin. So white chooses here to open with a queen pawn. The pawn in front of the king is called the king pawn. That's the king pawn. And the queen pawn is the one in front of the queen. Okay, so now black. Very, very good. He had a choice to take the bishop or the pawn, but of course the bishop is worth 3 points, 3 pawns, and the pawn only worth 1. So very good move by black, and a blunder by white to put the bishop on that unsafe square. Now we've got a battle in the center, and we see an interesting thing by both players. Both players have put a knight on the edge of the board, which is actually usually not a very good strategy, because knights on the edge of the board only have half of their possible squares. They can only move to 4 squares, whereas a knight in the middle of the board can move to 8 squares. So knights on the edge, knights on the rim are dim. And both knights on the rim right now under attack. Put those knights out of their misery. They get traded off. And white has made a castle here, but it's actually very interesting because even though he's castled, it's normally safe to have a castle. I'm going to pause for a second. But in this situation, this pawn has wandered up and taken the knight, meaning there's a gaping hole in white's defenses. So this could be a problem for white in the long run. Let's continue. Okay. And it's been a real capture fest so far. Pieces hanging and captured left and right. The most important thing when you're first playing chess is to look on every move to see if you can make a capture for free. Take a hanging piece. A hanging piece is a piece that you're attacking that isn't defended, and there have been a lot of those hanging pieces today. And the second most important thing is when it's your turn, see if any of your pieces are hanging and get them out of danger. And if you take free pieces and save your pieces, you're going to start winning a lot of chess games. Now after that, after just taking stuff and saving your own stuff, comes development, and both sides are doing a fair job of that in this game. Black's got 2 bishops out, and this sad knight is not developed yet. And white's got out a rook, queen, and knight, but the queen side is mostly undeveloped. So coming into the middle game here, I hope we see both players bring out all of their pieces, because that's when the true power of your entire chess army shines, when everybody is in the game. Some more capturing happening here in the middle of the board, but that bishop, okay, the queen has been snagged. And in this kind of situation, when your queen has been taken, usually you feel like the world has just ended. It's good to take a deep breath, slow down, get your bearings, and then continue. Okay, another expensive piece snapped off. And Leo takes the advantage. If we look at the material on the whole board, black is ahead by a queen and the rook for a knight. Black also has an extra pawn. So a queen and a rook for a knight is a big advantage, but will he be able to convert that advantage into a win? Oh, I misspoke. Actually, it's just a queen and a rook for nothing, because you see there's this bishop over here that I didn't notice. And now we see that castle that I was talking about earlier is coming under attack. Only one little pawn is left in front of that king, keeping that king safe. So the biggest theme of this game is hanging pieces, is people just leaving pieces under attack, not saving them, not capturing them, and that's the biggest thing that most players can work on. You can't do that because it is actually check. So let's go back here, and how can you get out of check? Not that way. Okay, the only move, rook to g2, blocking the check, and a beautiful checkmate. And this checkmate demonstrates what's called the power of the pin. It looks like the rook can block the other rook, but then the king would be in check from the queen. So the rook can't block both of them. The rook is pinned to the king, and the king has nowhere to run. Beautiful game, checkmate. So let's shake hands. And as I've already said a few times, the tip of the day is very simple. Every time it's your move, you must check the board and see, can I capture anything for free? Or, if you can't do that, do I have anything that can be captured for free? And if so, move it to safety or defend it. So in this game, it was a very good example. Both brothers were just taking things left and right, which meant that they were leaving things hanging for the other person to take. And as you get better and better at chess, you get better and better at spotting pieces that are hanging and capturing them. All right? That was the tip of the day. No, I'll do the tip of the day now.